So the second proxy that I look at is the internet search activity. And while this is not a direct measure of nationalism as such, what it's useful for is showing us when, fairly precisely, because it's a daily reading from the 𝗱𝗲𝘁𝗃 Baidu index, it's like Google Trends, gives you a daily reading of the level of internet search activity, this level of demand for information among the public on the topic. So it gives us a good example, a good idea of the fairly precise timing of when people really got interested in the issue. So this is a good way to track the trajectory of those nationalist sentiments. Next slide, please. So this is the big picture from 2006 through to 2012. And what we can see here is that the level of Baidu search demand for information on the South China Sea is pretty consistently low all the way through until the first quarter of 2009. So that's when it first ticks up. Then it sort of scuds along for a bit, and then it surges again into a new high in the third quarter of 2010, and then it really takes off in the middle of 2011. So let's look in a little more detail at those three sort of inflection points. Next slide, please. So this is the first one in the first quarter of 2009. And what we see here is, this is March the 5th, when China launches its campaign of harassment against a US spy ship in the South China Sea. It creates a serious international incident, and it's when the United States chooses to go public about this incident that the Foreign Ministry is forced to respond, and it's only then, it's not the incident itself, it's only after the Foreign Ministry comments on the incident that the Chinese netizens start to demand information about it. And it surges when central television starts to cover the issue. So that's the first sort of takeoff, early 2009. And the point about the significance of this being in early 2009 is that this is well into China's more assertive foreign policy in the South China Sea. This is some other research that I've done has quite clearly pinpointed it as starting from around 2006 or 2007 at the latest, that China really starts to build up its presence in the disputed area and to regularly coerce the other countries there. So this is more than 2 years earlier. So it can't be this surge in nationalistic sentiments that drove the South China Sea expansion policy. Next slide, please. Zooming in now on the 2010 surge in interest towards the South China Sea issue. We see here, this is where Hillary Clinton declares the US has a national interest in the South China Sea for the first time. And once again, it's not Hillary Clinton's statement itself, but rather the PRC party state's responses to the Hillary Clinton statement that really drive the demand for information on the South China Sea issue to a new high. And then it's sustained for a matter of a couple of weeks here, and then we have hawkish generals like Luo Yuan and Dai Xu, these guys, these external propaganda, military external propaganda experts, starting to really heat up the rhetoric about it, pushes it to the first, this is a new high, where it's close to 4,000. So that's the second surge in the third quarter of 2010. And this is the background from which the third surge, which I pointed to, the much bigger one, in 2011 comes from. Next slide, please. So what happens here is that it's China's actions cutting the cables of a Vietnamese survey ship, which really pushes the tensions up in terms of Vietnam's response, military drills, high-strung rhetoric, and when that reaches the Chinese audience, it really pushes the level of nationalistic fervour to a new high. Now, I say nationalistic fervour, you can't just assume that nationalistic fervour is what's underpinning these surges. We have to look at it in terms of the actual content of what was going on the internet at the time. So that's the third proxy indicator that I'll come to now. Next slide, please. The point being that ultimately the state's policy changes, and then the level of demand for information, the level of feeling about the issue surges inside China. So it's not the other way around. It's the policy change followed by the surge in nationalistic sentiments.